I just want to start this conversation by asking you, you had shared with me that you feel a little bit nervous. You felt earlier some hesitancy around just this conversation. Could you just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of the people that are involved in the stories we're going to talk about today are very close to me. And people are multifaceted. Like my family has done some stuff, and it's hard to talk about those things when it's not even completely resolved, like interiorly. Or the therapist that I worked with, like I became friends with, and we still are in contact from day to day. Not from day to day, but like a couple times a year.
Oh, wow.
And I know that those relationships can get hurt if I talk about it. And that's just like unsettling. But when I was sitting with it, this morning preparing for our conversation, um, I was thinking about one that this quote that I heard that was viewing the consequences of our actions is not punishment. And like I'm not seeking
Mm-hmm.
like a vendetta against
Yeah.
them, just telling the
Yeah.
truth. And I
Mm.
was thinking about, the 7-year-old version of me that was crying himself to sleep, afraid he was going to
Yeah.
go to hell.
Yeah.
And just like, that's not what a kid should go through. And I can't help
Yeah.
him
Yeah.
then, but like, I can do this for him right now.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times when I have these conversations, one of the things that I try to remind people is that, these are all stories that are ongoing. This is also not necessarily the story. This is one story that's important to you, that's important for this conversation, that hopefully will be helpful to other people. But all the people involved and that we brought into this story, they all have their own stories, their own narratives about what happened, what's going on. They're all growing and changing. And certainly, I think it's important to be direct, to talk about harms that people caused, while also giving people the grace to know that, like, they may have been well intentioned, that, they're also figuring a lot of this stuff out as they go. And I don't think that's inconsistent with wanting accountability. But you can also certainly be gracious to all of these other people involved and recognize that, like, they have their own lives and their own stories that have their own value too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, let's maybe just kind of get into it then.
sounds
So,
good.
Greg, we're not going to have time to touch on all of your story today, and maybe we'll do some more of that later. But a lot of what I'm really focused in on, and I've been interested in lately, is just conversion therapy, how people end up in it, how it goes for them, how they make sense of it afterwards. I want to start with in a bit of an odd space. You went through what you now understand as conversion therapy. When in relation to the conversion therapy, did you realize that what you were going through was conversion therapy?
Ooh, that's a good question. Not for a long time afterwards, honestly. Um,
Like
and
months afterwards, year
years,
afterwards? Okay.
years.
Okay.
Um, and partially because, like, I'm sure we'll get into being so rooted in it, but then also like
Yeah.
even secular narratives about what
Yeah.
conversion therapy is. Like I think about I saw the
Mm.
movie Boy Erased and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, it wasn't like that. So
Yeah.
that's probably not what it was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until really starting to talk to other people who had been through it.
Yeah.
And, not to bring you into this story too much, but I remember telling
That's
you
fine. Yeah.
for the first time and you being like, can we just pause and talk about how fucked up that was?
Yeah.
That, your response and other people's to have me be like, oh, I can stop protecting this and saying it was
Mm.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and even like before we started filming, I said, like, there's parts of me that are still like, was it really?
Mm.
And so there's a lot of that ingrained that it's like, yeah, both years afterwards, but then also still reckoning with.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought you made a really interesting point. Sometimes the ways in which it's not just like Christian ex-gay culture that hides conversion therapy. It's actually a lot of the secular narratives and rhetoric around conversion therapy that can contribute to the way that conversion therapy hides. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It's on, we have this culture wars over conversion therapy. And it's interesting that the narratives put forward on both sides hid from you the fact that what you were going through was conversion therapy.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Actually, Greg, I mean, could you maybe just share a little bit about, what the experience was and why you understand it as conversion therapy?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it was tied up in a bunch of other things. So I approached this therapist, um, who at the time was also a coworker, um, because,
We'll come back to
yep,
that.
um, because he was rooted in the work of Dr. Bob Schutz, and I had heard so many great things about him, etc. So
Yeah.
I was approaching him not even for that, but to work on some other things in my life that I had noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I brought it up to him just as we're getting going because
Yeah.
I had been
Brought
hurt
and
in.
the it. What is the it
I
there?
brought up, let's see, how did I phrase it at the time? I think I was still using being same-sex attracted,
Okay.
um, and said like, "Hey, this is part of my experience.
Mm.
This is not what I want to talk about here. I don't want you to do anything with that or change it,
Mm.
but I'd
Yeah.
rather tell you now because I've been burned and I don't want
Mm.
to be hurt by that."
Yeah. Yeah. And how old were you roughly?
I was probably 20,
Okay. Okay. So pretty
19,
young in college.
20, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So how did, so you go in and you say, I have these attractions. It's not what I'm here to talk about. And I'm also not necessarily looking to do anything about them. I want to work on these other things, but I just want you to be aware of this because it's been an issue in the past.
Right.
How do we go from there to conversion therapy? What does that look like in your
So,
story?
so subtly. And that's been
Mm.
part of like puzzling it out. So even from like day one, he introduced reintegrative therapy,
Mm.
but he didn't frame it around um, to fix the gayness.
Yeah.
Like it
Oh,
had
interesting.
nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Um, it was framed around like the idea of reintegration therapy is that we've siloed so many parts of ourselves and have so many things going on, and we need to
Yeah.
bring ourselves back together into who we
Yeah.
are.
Okay.
And that was
Yeah.
such an attractive idea to me because I had
Totally.
internalized this idea of like, I am so broken.
Yeah.
Um, let's
Mm.
gather up the pieces and let's see what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Um,
maybe just for people who aren't aware, just a little context around what reintegrative therapy is. And maybe I'll just frame it within the history. So, in the past, you have these theories around conversion therapy, where same-sex attractions arise because you have some kind of wound from earlier in life that caused you to not accept your masculine identity fully. And because of that, you experience these attractions to other men, and Joseph Nicolosi Sr., who's considered by many to be kind of like the father of conversion therapy or father of contemporary conversion therapy, developed this framework that he calls reparative therapy, where you're repairing the wounds, and he says that one side effect can or will be a diminishment in same-sex attractions and the development of heterosexual desires. Um, Now, his son, Joseph Nicolosi Jr., has kind of repackaged these theories and calls it reintegrative therapy. So you're reintegrating all of these things. So there's the context for viewers. So Greg, for you, this story felt consistent with your experience and also with a lot of the rhetoric that you'd been hearing in Catholic circles, and a lot of the things that you've internalized. Can can you talk to me about how that story developed for you over the case of that therapeutic relationship?
yeah, so a lot of the focus is, you know, in Dr. Bob's work that my therapist was sort of a protege to is we have these wounds, and the wounds are creating like habits that create the fruit, which is sin. So we can't attack the sin. We need to go deep into the wounds. And like I
Mm-hmm.
really was struggling, like independently of these narratives, I was struggling with my relationship with my father, and I really wanted to get to the heart of why there was so much going on there. Um, and so we did. so much work
Hmm.
around, what's going on in that relationship, what can we find. It was a lot of imagination, but not like, again, not how it's portrayed a lot in the media where it's, I'm your father and here. It was, let's go back to these scenes in your life that you know are painful, and let's see what's going on. Let's imagine where God is in these moments. Let's imagine where you are, where is adult you. Like a lot of these things that feel um very therapeutic and are rooted in real, like we did EMDR as part of this process, and that was really healing and helping me see what is my responsibility, what is not, what is his, what is not. Um, but as I became more comfortable talking with him and, developing the therapeutic relationship, I would start bringing more and more, hey, like, I have this massive crush on my coworker and I don't know what to do about that. I'm reading these things online that say that maybe this would be helpful. What do you think about that? Um, and recognizing, like, one of the big things was just that he didn't push
Yeah.
back on any of that. He did always, always, always say that, it doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't really say much about me, period. But there was a lot of that, like, you're a beloved child of God, you're not gay, like those sorts of things that continued carrying through as well. And he was very clear to never promise that anything was going to go away. But similarly, he would state this could happen. He's seen it happen. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's not going to be our goal here, but it's something.
So, in the relationship, you identified yourself as gay, and then he said you should not identify yourself in that way. Is that right?
It was more, I would talk about how I was already then growing
Hmm.
really uncomfortable with the phrasing same sex attracted, because
Yeah.
to me it just felt like another label. So you're saying don't call yourself gay, call yourself same sex attracted. That just felt like
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
Um, and then him reframing of the, like, your core identity is a beloved child of God. So
Okay.
it
Yeah.
wasn't so much like, hey, don't call yourself gay, use this, but
Yeah.
more reframing, like, whichever thing, like, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, this is really interesting to me, and I think it's an important but really subtle point, right? Because in the therapeutic relationship, the therapist is supposed to let the client do the framing when it comes to values and goals for therapy. So when I hear that, part of what I'm hearing is that you are expressing a desire to use certain language when it comes to your experiences. And what he's trying to do is overriding how you're inclined to approach these things with a value framework that he hasn't checked in on you with yet. Right. So when I think about
Mm.
an ethical therapeutic relationship, a therapist should really ask you, how do you fit these things together? There are multiple ways of approaching these values. How would you view, yeah, like kind of like how you want to fit the puzzle pieces together for the context of your own life? Here, we're actually seeing the therapist step in and overriding the client's autonomy and the ability to frame their own values. Would you say that what I'm saying is it's consistent with your experience?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I never really thought about it that way, but it was very much, um unlike other therapy or therapeutic relationships I've had, even ones where the person is Catholic or Christian. It was very, like, so prayer centric in a way that, like, a lot of the framing was on letting God do the work,
Hmm.
and we sort of witness, and here's a word that I'm getting, let's follow that. Or like those
Yeah.
pieces too.
Yeah. And when you're saying like, here's a word that I'm getting, for the therapist, was it like, here's a word that I'm getting from you, or here's a word that I'm getting from prayer or from God?
Yeah, from prayer. Hey, I'm sitting with this.
Okay.
This may or may not be true, but I'm just getting the sense that da da da.
Yeah, this is
How
really,
does that sit with you?
this is so murky. And this is one of the things that you see consistently in the writings of Dr. Bob when he talks about his relationships with his clients, is he'll say that, we'll do prayer together. And then I get this inclination that God wants me to say something. And then I communicate that to the client and say, I'm getting this from God. This is a really, really subtle, what I would call an abuse of power here, right? The therapist say, I'm getting something from God and I'm acting as the mouthpiece of God in this situation, right? And even if they're saying something like, well, I think God's telling me this, but I'm not sure. As soon as you frame it as I think I'm getting this from God, because of the power dynamic, what vulnerable kid going to them for help is going to ignore that? They're going to say, well, this is a person in position of authority. They're clearly really prayerful. Clearly God's communicating to them more directly because I'm broken, right? So I'm going to be
Oh,
deferential to that.
100%. And I mean, like, at that point, I really idolized Dr. Bob. I thought the stuff that he was doing was incredible. So, like,
Yeah.
he worked directly with Dr. Bob. He works with Sister Miriam all the time. He worked
Yeah.
with, you like name a Catholic celebrity, and he either
Yep.
knew or did retreats with them. He
Yep.
went to seminaries and did this kind of work at seminaries with Dr.
Yeah.
Bob and with other people. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, so, like, he's working with what I thought were these giants of spiritual healing and faith and prayer and everything that I
Yeah.
wanted to be. And here I
Yeah.
am, this heretical little gay boy who,
Yeah. Yeah.
wants
But
to
not even
sleep with his best
heretical,
friend.
right?
And it's like, no, but that was the like,
Yeah.
I want to sleep with my best friend. I think that what's going on in my heart is wrong and that I'll go to hell for it. And I'm starting to not even believe that I'll go to hell for it anymore. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, I'm really bad.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure that he was really well intentioned. I think that most people in this space are. But if you take seriously professional ethics and boundaries when it comes to professional practice, which is really important to me as a lawyer, this is really, I mean, I think it's really troubling. I think it's unethical and I think it's unprofessional, to be honest.
Well, one of the things that helped me go back and revisit this and start seeing that things were interesting here was, yeah, like I said, we stayed friends and we continued to stay friends and coworkers. Like, yeah, the mudding of the lines.
Yeah, which is
But
like
then,
so common in these spaces.
like every
Yeah.
therapist I've had since, like one of the best therapists, no, the best therapist I've ever had. Like when I was moving from one city to another, he was like, okay, like let's start preparing for this. And I was like, well, we can keep in touch, right? Because again, I had the framework, and he was like, no,
Yes.
like this is, and I haven't talked to him in years,
Yeah.
and that like sucked, but also it made it like, oh, okay, that's what this thing was.
Yeah. I mean, that's like very standard. I have this conversation with my therapist. When we start the therapeutic relationship, they say, if I see you in public, I will not acknowledge you because that's what we do in our profession, right? When you want to have appropriate boundaries. But here, the boundaries are so blurred.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I just talked to you about, yeah, like these dreams that I've been having, and now we're sitting next to each other in a staff meeting. It's interesting.
Yeah. And there was actually a therapist recently who works in the deconstruction space and has a lot of clients who recently had an ethics complaint filed against her because of the therapy she was doing with the members of her staff and the ways in which it can lead to inappropriate abuses of power. Right. So this is something that is actually quite serious, but therapists in these types of spaces they don't, they're not being held accountable. Yeah. Greg, I want to come back to something earlier. So earlier you talked about getting into this therapy and working on these kind of father wounds, which we know is kind of a trope in ex-gay theories, that one of the common ways in which you can develop same-sex attractions is because of your relationship with your father, and you develop these wounds, then you seek out masculinity elsewhere, right? But in the context of your therapeutic relationship, you do want to improve your relationship with your father, or the way that you process your relationship with your father. And it sounds like you were working on that. What was so wrong with that? What was there anything problematic about that? What do you make of that part of the therapeutic relationship?
Well, again, that's another space where disentangling everything has honestly been really confusing because, yeah, the whole reason I was seeking out therapy independently was I knew there were things that I was noticing in my relationship with my father that I wanted to work on, and I had no idea how.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and I knew all the like XK theories and things, but
yeah.
that's part of why explicitly on the very first day I'm like, this is not what I am here for,
Hmm.
but you need to know this as context because
Yeah,
that's going to make, I thought, oh, I know everything. That's going to make
yeah,
my red flag go up.
yeah.
Um, but again, so it wasn't ever like all the work with my father. I can't think of a single time that it was, and now gay, this is where gay comes from, etc.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of let's go to a specific memory. Um, let's we would start in prayer, go to a specific memory that had been identified through prayer of like let's
Hmm.
let God reveal where we're going to go today.
Hmm.
Um, and then going to that, talking through the memory, replaying it, and then sort of replaying it through each person's what's going on here, and then
Hmm.
where is Jesus in that moment? What
Hmm.
is Jesus doing
Hmm.
in this moment?
Yeah.
Where, um, what do you think he's saying here? How can
Hmm.
we invite him into this place to heal it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was very much the process for like each site, I guess, that we would go to.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I do have a lot of thoughts about that. Yeah, on the one hand, one part of this is it also seems to me like here we're confusing therapy with spiritual direction, right? Like that's not what you weren't going there for spiritual direction. You were going for therapy. Um, but again, I kind of want to come back to, I think a lot of people hearing that would be like, wait, that sounds like a good thing. What's wrong with that? And I guess I raise that to you, Greg. Like, what's wrong with that?
Well, I think going back, one, it's interesting that, you've mentioned a bunch of times the nature of the therapeutic relationship, etc. He explicitly told me I can't do this operating out of my license. So what we're doing is pastoral
Oh,
counseling.
okay, okay, that's interesting.
So I guess I should make that clear that,
Okay, that's helpful.
but not just with me, all of the work that he did in his practice at the time was pastoral counseling explicitly, not
Yeah.
therapy.
Yeah, and I guess I would ask you, Greg, when you went there, what were you going there for? Were you going there for
Therapy.
therapy? Okay, so you were, and okay, so you went there for therapy, you asked for therapy, and what happened? Did he basically just say we're going to do pastoral counseling instead?
Well, yes, but I didn't even have a framework for how that was different. I'm like, here's a
Okay.
licensed psychologist. If the difference is just that he's not operating out of his license and it means that
Yeah.
he can work with me,
Yeah.
and it was framed as like, and I can bring more prayer in if we're doing it
Yeah.
this way. And
Yeah.
you know I was getting into the charismatics and all these things. I'm like, oh, prayer
Yeah.
healing, this sounds amazing.
Yeah. I as a professional, this just like astounds me, to be honest. Like I imagine like someone going to me for legal advice and me being like, oh, instead I'm gonna give you counseling. And like them not really knowing what that means, and also not knowing that like if I'm just giving like counseling, I'm not accountable to any external bodies. There are actually no best practices that I'm accountable to. If I do something wrong, there's no reporting mechanism. That's, I mean, it's, on the one hand, it's wild to me. On the other hand, it's so common in these spaces.
Oh yeah, and
And
again,
it
it's
feels
like
so manipulative.
Well, and he was working with everyone that like the Catholic world that I was in at the time was like, so um
Ugh. Yeah.
so what I would say is exactly that, an answer to your question about what's like insidious, I guess, or anything about that is exactly that. Like there was therapy actually happening as well. Like we were doing EMDR, which is like a real therapeutic technique to help with PTSD and other
Yeah.
things. Like those were really there,
Yeah.
but I never knew where the line was between prayer and therapy, or if there
Yeah.
even was a line,
Mm-hmm.
because there was no clear delineation of like, we're done praying now and now we're in therapy. It was
Yeah.
the therapy is the prayer.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
technically, I mean, if you said that what you're doing is pastoral counseling because I can't do this as a therapist, I think technically you weren't ever in therapy. Like technically you were not receiving licensed therapeutic practices. You were receiving things that he took out of therapy and then reinserted into a very different kind of practice.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Which I think
I guess
also raises ethical questions.
one, I guess another phrasing or framing is I'm 20. I don't know any different. So in my mind,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
getting therapy. It's just a different name.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's allowing me to pay less because I didn't have money. It's
Yeah.
allowing me to, circumvent. I saw circumventing ethics as great because I'm like, oh, I'm already friends with this person. We already
Mm.
work together. I don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't look suspicious if I'm,
Yeah.
going to have a meeting with him because we work in the same place. So,
Yeah.
um, so for me, that was a perk, not a like, it was almost like, this is great that this isn't real therapy. Because
Yeah.
in my mind, it still was.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Ugh, there's just so many parts to this. It's like what we've been focused on. So okay. So I just kind of want to continue down so you're working through all these wounds, you're working through all these memories, you're working on reprocessing these memories in the process, in the context of prayer, and also doing, I don't want to call it talk therapy, I guess, doing pastoral counseling. I guess he would frame it. Again, I kind of want to come back to, looking back now, setting aside all those ethical questions around boundaries and the role of the therapist. Again, what do you see as problematic about like the narratives that you are receiving and the way that it kind of like encouraged you to perceive your sexuality?
Yeah. I would say healing isn't making things go away. Um, the way that it was pitched to me was once we heal the wounds, the problems are gone. And if
And
the
the
problems
problems
aren't gone,
being, what are the
whatever you're,
problems?
so whatever you're working on. So whether that's, um, my queerness or my issues with my father, but the
Yeah.
problems also being the sin. The focus was always on eliminating the sin.
Okay.
So,
Oh, interesting.
I would talk to him a lot about struggling with pornography because,
Yeah.
like, that's the worst thing that a man can do.
Yeah.
Um, and here I was, like, I legitimately thought at the time that watching gay porn was better than watching straight porn because all I heard in men's talks was, um, don't objectify women. And I thought, I'm a man, I can't objectify men, so I'm actually doing a lot better.
Uh,
Um,
oh,
but
that's
yeah, so
actually really funny.
it's
Yeah.
hilarious. But if I wanted
Yeah.
to stop watching porn, I needed to heal my relationship with my father. And if
Yeah.
I'm still
Oh,
looking at
interesting.
porn, it means that my relationship with my father isn't fixed.
I cannot, Greg. Yeah. I mean, this is also just like theologically incorrect. Like, therapy cannot heal concupiscence. This is another weird thing that Dr. Bob does, is he tries to kind of wave away concupiscence by saying that you can essentially step out of sin through prayer healing or pastoral counseling or whatever it is that he provides. Like, this is actually just theologically problematic
That
for
was one of the
Catholicism.
first cracks, honestly.
Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Was a couple of years later, I was living with someone who was a recent convert and, had all the passion. and all of that. But I was talking to him about reading Dr. Bob and all these people, and he was like, "Oh, that's wrong."
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
mean, like,
what do you mean?" And he was pointing out that exact thing. He's like, "Here it is in the catechism. Here's how this is incorrect." And it was like,
no, I mean,
wait,
what Dr. Bob and a lot of these like pastoral counselors, whatever you want to call them, do, it's not just junk science, it's also junk theology. And for me, I think that was also my in to like, why is this problematic? As someone who had studied a lot of theology, when I started like reading through these materials, my like gut reaction wasn't like, this is problematic from a therapeutic perspective. My gut reaction was, this is just theologically incorrect. And that's,
right.
I think, one of the things that first got me really interested in this stuff and how it shows up in the church, especially as someone
Well,
who's so
and
passionate
then
about theology.
yeah, well, and then interestingly, the a therapist I found later, I'd actually followed him growing up online. He had a secret blog about just being a gay Catholic, and then
Oh,
he
interesting.
deleted all of it, and cleared his online presence to
Yeah.
go do that. But then working with him and learning what a therapeutic relationship is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that I worked on with him was that healing isn't, not only is it not linear, but it's not fixing things. It's learning how to incorporate them into your life.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
by that point, I was like, I don't even know what my relationship with my sexuality is.
Yeah.
And he was very clear, like, well, you know,
Yeah.
we're not going to poke that in that sense. We're going to help you
Yeah.
have peace with whatever is there.
Yeah.
And just that difference of like, no, what happened in the past happened.
Yeah.
How do we,
Yeah.
ironically, reintegrate your whole self, but not reintegrative therapy, but
Yeah.
genuinely like learn, oh, these bad things happened.
Yeah.
Um, and these good things happened, and all of it is your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it like, so one of the pieces was the theology years later. I think another piece was that like having real therapeutic relationships that are clearly defined and seeing what the difference was in framing from um and like most of the people that I worked with afterwards have been Christian or Catholic,
Yeah.
but the difference of like prayer is over here and therapy is over here,
Yeah.
and not that we can't bring one to the other, but we're
Yeah.
doing different things here.
Yeah. 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 One of the things that I often come back to is just, what is the resurrected Christ, right? Dr. Bob is really interested in this concept of like restoration. That's so much of what his like books focus on, what his work focuses on. But when you think about who the resurrected Christ is, it's not a Christ who like, experiences restoration. The resurrected Christ is the Christ with holes in his body, right? And actually, like the holes in his body are a source of greater goodness than if he would have had bodily wholeness. Which is another thing that like a lot of these conversion therapists focus on is like this concept of wholeness. And to
Yes.
me, Christian theology, I think, really pushes against that.
Well, and again, after my friend pointed out the bad theology, that was one of the points he brought up was like, did Jesus come back with holes in his body or not?
Yeah,
And it was like,
yeah,
oh, okay, huh. And
yeah,
so through, I guess, that cluster of talking to more people and having some of them be like, what the fuck, of having
yeah.
new relationships, because I mean, we haven't
Mm-hmm.
even gotten into like the stuff with Jason Everett and all of the
Mm-hmm.
things that
Yeah,
put me in a
that kind of like
spot.
primed you for that.
Yes, primed. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah,
To accept conversion therapy, or the like Christian narratives I read about the things that I should be doing with men to make me less gay. That's a whole, probably not for this podcast.
well, I mean, that stuff's why we've talked about some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so I was bringing all of that into this space with this pastoral counselor. And then the lines, I think that was the biggest thing, is that the lines between everything were so blurry. The lines
yeah,
between hope and despair, the lines
yeah,
between is my
mm,
sexuality healable or
yeah,
not? Is that even what we're working towards? Is this prayer? Is this therapy? Are
Yeah.
we friends? Are we coworkers? Are we in a therapeutic relationship? Like,
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
that was so
Yeah.
much of like the damage was
Yeah.
I don't even know how to disentangle what was theologically correct and what wasn't. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think like one of the things that also comes to mind is, in a lot of these relationships where people are doing this reintegrative therapy or this pastoral counseling, where the lines are blurred, the boundaries are blurred. One of the things that I think they're inadvertently preparing people to do is have other kinds of relationships with unclear boundaries, right? And this for me is really concerning because this is one of the things that's propped up the clergy abuse crisis, right? Is the ability to create
100%.
unclear boundaries between pastoral leaders and members of congregations.
I basically had my first boyfriend around this time.
Mm.
That was, the best friend that I had fallen in love with.
Yeah.
And like anytime I brought up a boundary that was being crossed, there was no like, hey, can we like poke that? It
Hmm.
was just, it was either framed as like growing in male intimacy and this is beautiful,
Yeah.
or it was like, okay, great, so what are we really going to talk about today? Or
Mm.
or a common, like, what were you seeking in that was a common question,
Yeah.
which I could see how that would be a good therapeutic question, like, generally, if it was
Yeah.
followed up with other things. But there
Yeah.
was never a, like, hey, it sounds like you might be crossing some boundaries with
Yeah.
him. Have you talked about what these things are?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
both had girlfriends that like it was so messy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things that I often see in these spaces is there's an over pathologizing of experience to where you don't deal with the issues at hand, right? Yeah. I mean, I had very similar situations in my adolescence where I would get into confusing relationships and I think on both sides we didn't know how to articulate boundaries and we kept kind of like over spiritualizing, over explaining what was going on
Oh, that
in
was a
ways that
huge one.
never allowed us to like build boundaries.
We're crossing boundaries because this is helping my healing journey. That was a
Yeah.
lot of the phrasing. And that was
Yikes.
why a lot of boundaries were allowed to be crossed because it was there. And then
Yeah.
it would be celebrated as like, look at this healing journey that you're on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if this is your experience, but in my experience with that stuff, what's going on the side is I'm going around hurting a bunch of other
Oh,
people
100%.
in my process of like processing and finding deeper wholeness and stuff. Like meanwhile what's happening on the other side is all these people are getting hurt. And then on the other side of the relationship, I have to deal with the fact that I hurt a bunch of people and
Yes.
maybe I was kind of guided into doing that hurt, but it's still hurt that I did, and I have to be accountable for.
Oh, yeah. It was probably 6 years later that two pretty big things happened. That one, like, long story, but I essentially became the other woman in a marriage. And I knew what I was doing, but I didn't. And the wife said to me, you were my friend and you
Mm.
cheated on my husband. You cheated, you helped my husband cheat on me.
Ugh.
And
Yeah.
we never did anything physical,
Yeah.
but even just the romantic
Yeah.
boundaries. So is that, and then the friend from years and years ago, we eventually had a friendship breakup that was more of a real breakup. He came to me and he said, I felt like you were really abusing me in that relationship.
Ugh. Yeah.
And that just opened my eyes to like, oh my gosh, I have this trail
Yeah.
of people behind me that
Yeah.
I not excusing at all, but I
Ugh.
genuinely believed
Yeah.
like, oh, you're helping me, and instead I am
Yeah.
actively causing harm. And then that was a
Yeah.
whole new thing to reckon with of like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I've hurt so many people when I thought I
Yeah.
was being a good, holy person.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, yeah. It brings up a lot for me. I relate to a lot of what you're saying, Greg. I'd be really curious for you, just now, kind of journeying further. I think there's so many ways we can unpack this. I kind of want to move forward a little bit. And, thinking about that stuff, I think accountability is always an ongoing journey. So you've shared how you inadvertently hurt people in ways that were facilitated by what we would understand as conversion therapy that you experienced in pastoral counseling. What has accountability looked like or started to look like for the harms that
Hmm.
you've caused, recognizing that you both harmed people and also were a victim in these situations?
Yeah, it's a really complicated space to be in. Um, I think at first it was a lot of pride of like, well, since I did these things because I was hurt, I'm not responsible. Or the other,
Yeah.
like, it doesn't matter, I am scum. Like, very,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
one thing that really helped was finding other people that had been through these sorts of things and also had these similar realizations of, oh my gosh, I have this trail of harm
Yeah.
that is very complex that help me not feel alone,
Yeah.
um, and be like, oh, I have examples of what to do. But then I think it's like one, cutting out all the behaviors that I could notice, and that has taken a lot of work and time of just like, oh, this is an unhealthy behavior. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm still learning to practice boundaries. Like that's still
Mm.
been like, oh, this is
Yeah.
hard. But then
Yeah.
I think it's also like with several of them, I've been very direct. Like I said, like with the friend that I was basically dating, he sat me down and he told me about what it was like for him and all of these things. And
Mm.
I
Yeah.
apologized and offered, like, what do you want? Do you want
Yeah.
to like press charges? Do you want to like,
Mm.
just because I was so like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Not just that I did it, but that I
Yeah.
didn't even real like genuinely
Yeah.
didn't even realize that this was bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now he's one of my best friends again, and this is still
Yeah. Yeah.
still really healthy. But then
Yeah.
others, like the husband and wife, they cut me out of their life and said,
Yeah.
um,
Mm.
don't ever talk to us again.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that has meant respecting that. With other
Yeah.
people, it's I've lost touch with them and I don't know if they
Yeah.
want to hear from me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the ways that I can do that is by doing this. At the beginning I talked about being scared to share my story for like
Yeah.
fear of who I might hurt with it. But
Yeah.
again, part of the motivation was, but I have hurt people.
Yeah.
And by not hiding it, then I'm not contributing to this spirit of clergy abuse and all of these other spaces where
Yeah.
it's all about hiding. It's
Yeah.
owning and saying, I was hurt and I hurt and I
Yeah.
can't fix it, but I can at least apologize and do work to try and
Yeah.
help stop it from happening.
Yeah. 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 So, Greg, we're kind of running up against time, and
That's
I
all
actually
right.
would love to have another conversation about just like the journey of like healing and like finding, like wholeness. I don't know if wholeness is the right word, but finding like healing and joy and taking that accountability and developing this kind of like new life for yourself. But maybe I just want to close with the question, based on, obviously your journey continues, right? You're not at the
Right.
end point, you're making your way, but you're doing it, right? What advice would you have for your younger self when at the start of the realizing what was going on and wanting to start take accountability
Hmm.
and find joy?
Okay, I'm a writer, so it's going to be a bit literary, but
Okay, I'll take it.
when a tree gets a limb cut off,
Mm-hmm.
it heals with a knot
Mm.
and it keeps growing. The knot doesn't go away, it doesn't get covered up. It is always there, but it is no longer raw. It is no longer hurting the tree. It is just a sign of the story that was and the story that is now.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
as you're starting, it hasn't even formed a knot yet. You just noticed that the limb has been cut off.
yeah,
So be patient with yourself,
yeah,
be gentle, and recognize that doing these things isn't excused, but also the fact that you're asking the question, am I a monster, means that you're not.
hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
fact that you're talking to people about it means that you're not.
Yeah,
So give it time, because also I didn't talk about these things except privately until like now, right? So
Yeah.
give the time for the limb to turn into a knot, and then you can see where does my energy go after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks, Greg. I think we go on and on.
Oh, for
Hopefully
sure.
we'll do
I'm
some
happy
more
to
of
come back
these.
anytime.
But yeah, awesome. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Greg. That was great.
Thank you.